This comes to us from Kat Wheeler. She wrote a fantastic article. Essentially, she talks about being at a neighborhood gathering. Someone asks you, what do you do? And we as integrators do what we do best, which is conflate that question with a whole bunch of technical jargon that no one outside of our business has any idea what we're talking about. Why are we still at this point that we haven't figured out how to pitch ourselves to our clients?
Yeah, it can be really challenging when you're an integrator. It's not an easy one to figure out, which is probably why we're still talking about it.
How many times do we have to teach you this lesson, old man?
I love the young people.
On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk Expo attendance, Crestron is simplifying, and the power of the pitch. All this and more on this episode of ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 501, Pitch Power. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matthew Scott for AVNation.tv. And this week, I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Mr. Jason Griffing. He's the Director of Product at OneVision Resources. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thank you for being here. Then we have the one and only Mr. Ian Bryant. He's a Technical Manager over at IES Communications. How are you, sir?
Doing well. It's always a pleasure.
Excellent. All right, gentlemen, let's jump right in. This comes to us from CE Pro. Nearly 14,000 converge in Denver for CEDIA Expo 2025. Almost 14,000 registered attendees were able to take part in more than 250 educational sessions, as well as the show's destination outdoors, keynote address, the All-Star Band, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Go read through the article. As always, our good friend, Mr. Archer, kind of gave a quick overview of what that show looked like. As you all know, I was not there. Both of these gentlemen were. Jason, let me start with you on this. What is, being a couple weeks from the show now, what does success for the show look like for you as a manufacturer / exhibitor, especially when you see those numbers for attendees?
Yeah, I mean, I think the numbers are interesting. I can tell you that while I was there in Denver, there was a lot of talk. You run into all your old friends and you make small talk on the floor, right? And there seemed to be a pretty strong narrative around the show feeling a lot smaller. I will say that I didn't necessarily feel that myself, although as a vendor, I'm kind of chained to the booth the whole time. So I'm probably not the best person to speak to it anecdotally. I did go and look. I used AI to just kind of help research because I was curious, like how this 14,000 number compares to like previous years, right? And 2024, it was basically listed as over 15,200 combined registration. 2023, 15,500 total combined registrants. 2022, about 15,500. So just by those numbers, it does look like a little bit of a drop, but there's also some reporting in the past that's been around verified attendance versus registrations, right? And that's a subtle but important difference, right? And so
it's a very, very important difference.
I don't know what the actual verified registration, verified attendance was this year. I will say that, just from the little bit of walking around that I did, maybe felt a little bit smaller. I will say directly to your question, as a manufacturer there, I felt like we had a great show. We met our goals in terms of lead generation. A lot of our focus right now is also on building, more solid like brand partnerships with other companies in the industry. For those who don't know, I won't do a OneVision pitch here, but we do like service and support solutions for integrators, right? And a big part of our strategy right now is collaborating with other brands and manufacturers and so forth in the industry. So we got a lot of good results on that front as well. I'm proud to say we brought home a couple of CEDIA awards that we applied for, so that we entered ourselves in the running for. So, across those three things, like lead generation, sort of industry partnerships and brand momentum, for us, it was a very successful show. I know that others, much larger companies like the Sonys, Samsungs, Crestrons of the world, have very different sort of metrics for gauging success. Yeah. I have not talked to any of my contacts at those companies to kind of see maybe how things felt for them. So short answer is at least for us at OneVision, it felt like a successful show, maybe a little bit smaller than in years past, but not to the point where it really impaired our ability to, come out of the show feeling like it was a good use of our time and energy.
That's fantastic. All right, Ian. One of the things that they mentioned in the article was there was over 75,000 scanned leads, etc. 84% of the attendees had buying power. How do you, as an attendee, look at success of these shows? Again, whether 14,000 people registered versus 14,000 showed up, depending on which vendors were actually on site and what they offered. How do you justify the show as an attendee?
I think, it's multiple areas when it comes to the vendors, the engagement and the what they're bringing to the show, to how much staff they're bringing, how much product they're bringing to demo, to show. I think that from the show floor perspective, it seemed full. Then maybe they shifted the floor around and make it feel more full than it was, but it definitely felt like attendance was good. There was a lot of people in booths, a lot of people talking, getting demos. The sound booths were packed, huge long lines with them again, like last year, which was always great to see. But I think that you could definitely tell some of the big dog manufacturers that you used to have monster booths just have shrunk over the years, and this year have gotten even smaller. So there's not a big footprint with some of the really, really big name brands there as there used to be. I did notice a very big uptick in really small brands in the smaller areas. In the commercial side of the show, there are a lot of much smaller booths that people I'd never seen before. So that was really good to see. And then there's the other side of it, which is the education side. And from what I heard from, some of my fellow volunteers that were teaching, they said the turnout was amazing. A lot of classes were, full or near full, which I always think is a really good indicator of the type of people that are coming to the show. When education does well, it means usually that there's really good engagement from the attendees that are trying to be involved, trying to learn. So I heard that was a really good turnout, and we've had a couple years. I think Atlanta was some of the bad years, 2010, 2011 down there when education was just completely dead, and it also showed on the show floor. So I think hand in hand, if you have a good floor, good education turnout, it's usually a pretty good engaged crowd. And that's really, even if the numbers don't show, if it's not 14,000 and if it was maybe 10,000, if the engagement was really high, I think that's what's really most important. And I noticed, I spoke with some friends that were bringing new technicians for the first time. I heard a lot of first time attendees this year. And that's always, again, a very positive thing to see for the industry.
Speculating a little bit and looking forward, I am very curious to see. I know that one thing that's been tough for me personally, and I know for many others, is the timing of the show being right off the back of Labor Day weekend.
Yeah, it's terrible.
It's kind of brutal, especially as a manufacturer, because I had family in town for Labor Day. Yeah, they're here for 5 days. They leave, and I immediately go down to the convention center and have another 5 days of just nonstop, booth setup, show, tear down, and so. And I know a lot of people travel and have things going on.
Back to school for a large slate of the country
is
too.
Another thing. Here in Colorado, we start school really early, so that's not a factor for me. But in many parts of the country, it definitely is. Anyone coming from the East Coast, I think that's much more common out there. Yeah. So one thing that, I know they're doing next year is they're actually moving it to the week before Labor Day. And I don't know if that's better or worse. In some ways it might be better, but it's going to move from basically Thursday through Saturday, the week after, to Wednesday through Friday, the week before. Mm-hmm. So, for a lot of the integrators who attend will tend to leave the show on the last day anyways. Like Saturday is always dead. Yeah. Manufacturers, you're obviously there to the bitter end. So now you've got a bunch of people there till the bitter end on Friday before Labor Day weekend, which I know a lot of people like to take that day off, extend that long weekend. So I just wonder, what that's going to do to attendance and engagement, like Ian was saying. I think just generally like having the show line up so close to a holiday, whether it's before or after, it's just not optimal. And I don't think that's helping anything.
Yeah, it's definitely problematic.
Yeah.
We'll leave it at that. And granted, I also do recognize how hard it is to move shows around based on all the other shows that are in all the other venues. But yeah, again,
100%. And I'm assuming they probably got, potentially got a better deal on the show, like probably because not a lot of people want to do it around that time. So there's probably more availability and better prices. They can pass those prices on to exhibitors, hopefully, right? So like, I get it. Like I don't want to armchair quarterback this too much. Like I understand there's a lot of complexity here, but I will just say, as far as like trying to drive attendance and get as many people there as possible, just butting it up so close against a holiday just makes it that much more challenging.
Yeah. I will say that it is very odd that it is so close to a holiday, and it has been for years. But been
at least 15 years, 18 years it's been, though there were within that last 15 so years, they did shift it to the week prior to Labor Day a couple times. And it really, from what I remember, didn't make that big of a difference.
No, I just remember the early years, which were actually the Atlanta years for me, when I feel like it was late September. And that was, again, just due to my personal schedule, which is, of course, the only one that I actually care about. That was much better. Well, 100%. The only other thing that, and again, just because you brought up being an armchair quarterback and nitpicking, the only thing that I will nitpick on is, my gosh, please, someone release actual like printed badges. Those are the numbers we want to see. And I'm sure, as I will not speak for any exhibitors, but I'll tell you that if I was exhibiting, that's what I would want to know as well. I don't care how many people register. I want to know who actually showed up. And printed badges would be the easiest way to actually get that number, as someone who has worn multiple badges at times. All right, let's change. So again, it's going to be close. All right, let's change topics for a second. This comes to us from Residential Systems. At the show, Crestron debuted their next generation configuration tools, including some Apple Music streaming service partnerships, as well as a handful of other partnerships, a brand new remote that a good friend of mine had a hand in. So congratulations to the team behind the CEVO. Go read through this if you were not at the show and you didn't see a press release and you haven't seen the full slate of what they announced, because again, they did announce a fair amount. The couple things that I want to dig into on this, though, is the new Configure Pro system, which is designed to streamline their Crestron Home OS setup with a no programming system style of creation. Ian, let me start with you as I'm not going to go out on too far of a limb, I think, and say that you're probably the best programmer on the show today, and one of the best Crestron programmers I know. What does this move towards no programming look like and mean for the programming community, which is, albeit quite large? And is this also just kind of Crestron reading the tea leaves of where the residential market specifically has headed, or is that quickly getting towards?
Matt, we've been having this discussion for over a decade, man. It's nothing new, to be honest with you. I remember when I started a programming firm in 2010, and I had multiple people that year at CEDIA Expo tell me that I was going to fail, and the company is still running to this day. Though it's a commercial, I'll say it's not a residential programming firm. But, Crestron's been shooting for this for a while. They had Adagio first, and they went to Ping. They've been trying. AMX did this back in Panja back in the long time ago. Architects program. There's just been so many Crestron Studio software to try and simplify it. I mean, it's been on everyone's radar from the control system world for 15 years to figure out how to overcome the programming gap. And so the group of, there's, the independent programming across the country and world. And then there's programmers inside of integration companies. And we've kind of just been seeing this. I think what I'm actually rooting for Crestron Home. I'm actually very happy with the product that they've released. I think that they finally got it right, and it's a well done product. This new advancement to that building software to get the system set up is just making it that much better. The agreements and the partnerships that they're developing with additional manufacturers and software, I think, is just making the product even more robust. And so I'm all for it. I think it's great. From a programming perspective in residential, the Crestron Home, some of the other manufacturers like Elan and Control4 and Savant, you can get about 98% of the jobs done with their software that doesn't require either no programming or little programming or just configuration. But there's still going to be the very, very high-end custom projects that there are no drivers made for it. There's no integration made for it. And so the one thing that's nice is Crestron has the ability, you can build Crestron Home, and then you can use a Crestron standard processor to do custom coding and then integrate the two together to bridge the gap from your basic home setup to the advanced configurations. Like a couple years ago, Crestron Home didn't do BACnet IP, and if you had an HVAC system that communicated over that, you'd need a secondary processor. So there are ways around it, and the programming community is still going to be there. Eventually, it's going to be strained more and more in residential to where there's less and less programming opportunities. But the commercial world is still full of those, because the broad scope of products and manufacturers in the commercial world is just so vast that it can't really be put under one umbrella of an automatic program that does everything for you. So, maybe 10 more years there'll be less programmers, but I still think there's going to be opportunities in both residential and commercial for the custom high-end, very unique projects. And like I said, I'm as a programmer, I'm rooting for Crestron Home. I think it's a great product. So,
that's a good point.
Same conversation. When are the programmers losing their jobs? Well, if we're not programming it for the homeowners, we'll be working for the manufacturers to program the software to make it easy. So there's jobs everywhere for it.
Exactly. I love it. Jason, is this Crestron being reactive to the customer per se, or is this Crestron being reactive to the market in the sense of just simplification and who's driving that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's probably all of the above, in the sense that, customers are always going to want, more, faster, and cheaper, right? That's just like a law of the universe, right? And ultimately, it is our jobs as businesses, no matter what business you're in, is, to find ways to meet that customer demand, of course, in a way that you can be profitable as well. And ultimately, I see this as a great thing, different tools for different jobs. I completely agree with Ian. There's always going to be space for custom and high-end stuff that just won't be able to be met by these kind of off-the-shelf sort of WYSIWYG type editors and things of that nature. At my job at OneVision, I work on the software side of our business. So we're building software all the time. And we love tools and libraries and frameworks that give us, easy things to sort of pull and plug in, like Legos and building blocks, but then still have the ability, when those don't work exactly like you need them, you can then put on your other hat and start custom coding. And I think Crestron is kind of fitting into that bucket now. They've got a very, very strong pedigree in the very high end of the market, fully customizable. And now they are continuing to make progress in this easier kind of drag and drop type of programming environment. And ultimately, I think, the thing I think about is, when it comes to home technology and smart homes, we work in a very kind of resource constrained environment, meaning if it was significantly easier and cheaper to deploy these systems, probably a lot more people would have them, right? People, I think, generally want their homes to be more convenient, more secure, more comfortable. Technology is a great way to enable that. But today, even though it's gotten a lot cheaper over the last 10 plus years, it's still a significant investment. And the more that we can lower that barrier to entry, I think the bigger the pie gets, right? So I think it's great that these tools exist. I think it's wonderful that a company as strong as Crestron is coming in, putting significant resources into trying to figure out how to make this easier. And then the other facet I think about is, I've been in the CEDIA industry for close to 20 years now, was an integrator for a long time before I joined OneVision. And I worked at a bunch of different integration companies, and there was not ever an example I can think of where you didn't have some degree of key person dependency on the programmer, right? The programmer is the guy or gal that you're like, if this person gets hit by a bus today, we are screwed. And I think, that's great job security for the programmers, but from a business perspective, it's nice to know that like, if a customer needs a change or something goes sideways with a program, it doesn't require somebody with, really, really deep knowledge of how to do custom programming to get in there and kind of figure out what's going on. So I think it just makes everything easier, starts to, continue that pattern of bringing costs down and making the technology more affordable and hopefully more reliable. And then to Ian's point, there's always going to be a need for that higher end custom stuff as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, gentlemen, let's hit our last story of the day. This comes to us from a Residential Tech Today and a really good friend of the show, Kat Wheeler. She wrote a fantastic article about You Had Me at Smart Home, the art of the AV elevator pitch. Go read through the article because you should, if you're in this business, identify with this 100%. Essentially, she talks about being at a neighborhood gathering, someone asks you, what do you do? And we as integrators do what we do best, which is conflate that question with a whole bunch of technical jargon that no one outside of our business has any idea what we're talking about. We've all done it, don't lie. Heck, most of us did it today. She then goes on to talk about why those pitches fail and outlines a bunch of different ways to actually come up with a pitch that makes sense for not only your business, but for the people you interact with on a daily basis. So this is, I've been reading these articles for probably, as Ian kind of alluded to last article, over 10 years in the business. Jason, this is one of the best ones I've read on this, but why does Kat have to write this? Why are we still at this point that we haven't figured out how to pitch ourselves to our clients?
Well, I think there's a bunch of reasons, right? I think part of it ties back to actually, incidentally, what I was saying a minute ago about trying to grow the pie and make this industry bigger, because it is still fairly small. And, we just don't have the luxury of being able to say like, I'm an accountant. Not that that's an elevator pitch, right? But like if you're just making small talk at a dinner party and somebody asks you what you do and you just want to say I'm an accountant, like everybody kind of has a reasonable sense for what that means. But if you say I'm an integrator, you have no idea what you're talking about, right? So like it's just part of this is just because we are a more niche industry. And I think that's okay. Like I enjoy working in a niche industry personally, although I would like to see it continue to grow. Ultimately, I've done a lot of things in my career. Sales is not one that I consider myself particularly great at. So, I am not like the elevator pitch guy necessarily, but I like sort of a simple formula of just like, who do we serve? What do we do for them? And why does it matter? Right. Yeah. And so it's like, we help like discerning homeowners put customized technology into their home to help them make the house more convenient and comfortable and secure. Something that simple that just gets the point across can be a great way. Again, if you're at the dinner party conversation, context matters. Obviously, if you're out there talking to an architect, designer, potential homeowner who already is kind of coming into this conversation, knowing a little bit about who you are and what you do, now your elevator pitch needs to focus more on differentiation, right? So these are different kind of use cases. But look, I just think it's kind of hard, like whether we like it or not, it's just a little bit difficult to describe what we do as an industry. I will say that I have found it has gotten a little bit easier over the last, 5 to 10 years or so with more of the DIY stuff coming onto the market. So the, Alexas and Nest thermostats and Sonos music and things like that. So, my version of this today is when people ask me, again, I'm on the manufacturer side, so it's a little bit different, but I basically just tell people, so, I work in the connected home business. And so if you're not familiar with the smart home, this is things like home automation, networks, control, smart lights, smart shades. And like people start to nod their heads pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Like I think there's more awareness about what we do and, why it matters than there used to be. But it is, of course, still a challenge. I enjoyed the article. And I think she's spot on. Like definitely if I was still an integrator, this is something that I would be really trying to refine and think about because, we're B2B on our side. And so most of the people coming to us already have some sense for what we do. But it can be really challenging when you're an integrator. It's not an easy one to figure out, which is probably why we're still talking about it, like you said.
Yeah, pretty much. I will say I find it quite comical that in the AV space, we start with a short descriptor of what we do, and then we have to expand it to get people to understand what we do. In my construction company hat and side of my life now, we start with the complicated one because we tell people that we do custom millwork and cabinetry, focused renovations essentially. And when they look at me with that deer in headlights look, we go, yeah, we're contractors. And they go, oh, cool. Yeah, we get it. I got it.
Yeah.
Ian, when you see this, when you follow this, the one thing that I get a little concerned with sometimes is marketing in our spaces obviously needed and needs to get better because we're not great at marketing ourselves. But in my experience, I've kind of found that a lot of the really slick marketing integrators sometimes leave a little to be desired, shall I say. And I'm particularly picking on like some of the YouTube and Instagram and TikTok integrators. Is that a concern that the slick marketing and the slick pitches kind of can supersede the quality of work?
I mean, I don't think that's anything new, right? I mean, we've all seen.
No, it's not.
What we used to call them the trunk slammers, right? The people selling speakers in the back of the truck on the side of the road. Like, I mean, there's always going to be integrators. There's always going to be well, in your case, contractors. Anyone in any trade is going to have a small percentage of people doing bad work. And, if you've got someone that's got really good sales tactics and really good marketing, they can put up a good front and do some bad work. It's pretty much every trade. Unfortunately, it seems that in our industry, the bad ones leave a really, really bad taste in the mouth of the customer. It feels that it's more personal than just getting some bad cabinets or some it's so much more personal, and it takes another integrator to get that trust back. It's a lot harder, it seems, in our industry from what I've noticed. But I don't know. I think that's just going to be in any trade. But one of the things that I was thinking of when I read this article that Kat wrote, which was very great, very well written, it did remind me of something that I refer to a lot because I think it stands out, that the CEDIA Technology Advisory Council, a couple of years ago, did that Integrator 2027 white paper, and it was more about talking about how you're improving the life of your customer and their home, and by not just selling black boxes and big TVs, but we're actually trying to improve someone's lifestyle inside of their living condition in their quarters. And I think that elevator pitch talking about that kind of focusing on improvement and focusing on the personal side of it, and along with going into client discoveries that also focus on that, really can weave a really amazing storyline that an integrator is able to tell that most trades are not able to do. So I really liked how she gave examples, and it was very focused around the person and the people and their home and their experience. And so I think that you could, bring that across the entire process of your work and your business. So it's like you said, we the elevator pitch in our industry has been up for discussion for so long, because how do you get the point across? And then, as Kat mentioned, depending on who you're talking to, there's 20 different ways of presenting it, because everyone has a different view of what our industry is. But I think that it's extremely important, and I definitely, as both of you said, recommend going and reading it. And one of the things that she put in there was making sure that everyone in your company is on the same page with that elevator pitch and how it reflects in your business. And I think that was a really good one. So it's not just the sales team using the pitch. The technicians, when they're talking to the customers on the site, get it as well, and they kind of spread the same message. And it's a very important process.
I think this is a valuable conversation. I sometimes worry that what gets missed in this conversation is that the elevator pitch is really just one small component of a much larger, and Ian kind of alluded to this, a much larger sort of narrative that you really need to have dialed as a company. And I can share that at OneVision, we've had various iterations on this, but just recently, within the last probably 6 to 9 months, we went through the exercise of let's revise our brand messaging guidelines, right? And so there are a million different templates for this. If you're an AI user, you can go to ChatGPT or any Gemini or any of these other AI platforms and ask for a framework around this. But it's basics like what's our positioning statement? What are our core value propositions? Who's our ideal customer profile? Why are we different? What makes us different than our competition? And there's no need to complicate this. You can come up with a very simple framework, but the process of going through and getting that written is enormously clarifying. And then at the end of that process, you have this fantastic written document that, I feel like I've mentioned now AI several times, but just to go back there one more time, what we did then is we were able to take that brand messaging document, feed that as context to a custom GPT in our chat GPT account. And now it's a fantastic resource for, hey, we need to, write a quick email or newsletter summarizing this new feature, use our brand messaging guidelines. And now it knows, all of the core things that we want to emphasize in our messaging. And so it's a really, really useful exercise, whether you're going to use AI or not, just to get everybody on the same page. And that would be my one final point on it, is just don't get too myopic on the elevator pitch. Yeah. Because that is really just one component of a broader messaging strategy that I think is really more important to think about holistically. Again, I think the article is great. I think the elevator pitch is important, but make sure you don't lose sight of the other components that kind of feed into that as well.
Yeah, you definitely have to be able to follow it up.
Yeah.
Otherwise,
and just have it documented.
It's going to be a problem.
I think documentation is one of those things that's so hard to. It's very low urgency, right? Very high importance, but low urgency, and so it always slips to the back of the list. And at some point, you just have to bite the bullet, force yourself to get this stuff written down, and it'll pay dividends for a really long time.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, gentlemen, we are going to leave it there. Thank you both so much for joining us. Ian, if people want to connect with you, learn more about IES Communications, where can they do that?
You can go to our website at iescom.com. That's iescomm.com. And then I'm on social media pretty much everywhere, either Ian Bryant or iBryant20.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Jason, if people want to connect with you, learn more about OneVision resources, where can they do that?
Yeah, go check out the website at onevisionresources.com. I'm also fairly active on LinkedIn, just my full name, Jason Griffing, so you can find me there as well.
Excellent. Thank you again for joining us. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on all of the socials at Matt D. Scott. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek.
The network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
Hello, this is Steve Greenblatt, host of AVNation's A State of Control podcast. Each month, Rich Fregosa and I explore trending topics related to control programming and automation in the audiovisual industry We speak with a variety of AV professionals who share their perspectives, knowledge, and experiences. Please join us for this monthly conversation. Check out A State of Control on avnation.tv or wherever you get your podcasts.